Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Rox. Today I'm going to be giving you a list of recommendations. So the following is going to be a list of books that I think are very hopeful. I will probably be saying the word hopeful a lot in this video, so just prepare yourself for that. Take a shot every time I say hopeful. While I really like a good tragic ending, I think sometimes we just need some hopeful books, especially in this time. So I think giving you a few recommendations of books that are pretty hopeful is a good thing. Or necessary. But also nobody asked for this, I'm just giving it. Before I start, I will say, just because I think these books are hopeful, maybe you won't think the same, maybe you might disagree. I think these books are hopeful. But also I need you to keep in mind that this does not mean these books are not pretty dark or don't have some very dark themes. All I'm saying is at the end of the book, there seems to be a bit of hope. And that's something you can enjoy. You know what? Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, I'm like, yeah, I like tragic endings, but sometimes a really tragic ending with a bit of hopefulness is fun. It's a great thing. So maybe that's what I really like in tragic endings, is tragic endings with a little bit of hope spiced in there. There are 3 categories on this list. Some of the books are young adult, some of them are adult, and some of them are non-fiction. I'm gonna start with the non-fiction. The first one I'm gonna give you is gonna be a very basic recommendation, but also because I've talked about this book multiple times, and that is Wild by Cheryl Strait. So this book is a non-fiction. It follows Cheryl Strait after she's gone through a lot of really difficult life events, the passing of her mother, drug addiction, sex addiction, and then she goes on a hike in the Pacific Crest Trail, and it's like on the west coast of the US, from the Canadian border to the Mexican border. She starts not at the Mexican border, but north of the Mexican border is where she starts her journey, and then she makes her way up to the Canadian border. That is what this story follows, and it is definitely one of my favorite books. Is why I'm mentioning it first, because I know I've talked about it and I've also recommended it, but I do think this is a very hopeful book. It's important to keep in mind this is a non-fiction, so it's not like it has this cookie cutter perfect ending, because this is a real person we're talking about, so things just might not work out as they would in a fiction story. But I still think there's a very positive message to the end of the book. For this one, the movie is also really great. It was produced by Reese Witherspoon, and she also plays the main character, and it's just a phenomenal movie. The second nonfiction I'm going to recommend you is What I Was Doing While You Were Brooding by Kristen Newman. I only recently read this, and this follows Kristen Newman, who is a comedy writer. She writes for quite a few prominent shows. She's written for The 70 Shows, Chuck, How I Met Your Mother, and The Neighbors. And this book follows her story when she was mostly in her 20s and 30s. She traveled a lot. She really enjoyed solo traveling. Sometimes there was someone with her, most of the time she was alone. But she had a lot of relationships in these different places that she traveled to, and that's what this book follows. I would say this book is a very light read. Wild isn't really what I would consider a light read, but this one definitely is a light read. And I like the ending because I think it is very positive. It's a very hopeful ending. So that's why I recommend this one. The next nonfiction I'm going to be talking about is Bono by Trevor Noah. Most of us kind of knows how this one ends, because Trevor Noah, and he's in the US. He's a very successful TV host of The Daily Show. You know how it ends. That makes it a little more hopeful, I think, for me, but it's still a very hopeful book. You see all these challenges he goes through as a child, as a young adult, even the things his mother goes through. Super hectic. Really, really, really hectic. But it was fun to read about, and it is very funny. I know a lot of people here don't like Trevor Noah, but I think that's only because a lot of people say they don't like Trevor Noah because he's gotten too big, all the fame has gotten to his head, whatever. But I just think a lot of people don't like him because his overall message, especially on The Daily Show, is very liberal, and people here aren't liberal at all. So they just don't like Trevor Noah because that's most of his message. Okay, so the next pile we're going to get into is going to be the young adult novels. The first one I'm going to be talking about is the one that I think is also just a pretty basic recommendation, but I still think it's worth it, and that is Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda. A lot of y'all have seen the movie. I've actually not seen the movie, so I need to get on that. So this book follows Simon, who kind of falls in love with someone online called Blue. And then at some point he gets blackmailed because someone finds these emails that he's been exchanging with Blue. And the thing is, Simon is gay, but he's not out yet, so people don't know about this, and now he's being blackmailed, which is really, really sad. Simon's friends, Simon's parents, the people around him were so beautifully accepting of him, in the novel, so I think that's why this is a really hopeful story. The next one takes a much darker turn. Again, I would say Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda is a very light-hearted read, but the next one is not, and that is Winter Girls by Laurie Anderson. She's the author of Speak, which I've not read, and I don't plan to because it sounds really sad. Major trigger warnings for eating disorders, because our main character, Leah, suffers from an eating disorder, and she's just lost her other friend who also died because of her eating disorder. This book is extremely difficult to read, so you can't just like pick this up willy-nilly, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was beautifully written. I really enjoyed the writing in this book. It was so melancholy. I also thought it was a very raw portrayal of eating disorders. I felt like the author definitely, I don't know if she has experience on this or if she just did her research really well, but I really thought it was a very accurate portrayal. The ending isn't, again, it's not your cookie cutter perfect ending, but it does give a sense of hope. It does give you a sense of like things can get better. So that's why I would recommend this one. The next one I'm going to mention is Pet by Kwekemezi. I really like Kwekemezi's writing style. It's very poetic, but it's very flowery, poetic, but there's just this other, I don't even have the words to describe it. It's this other worldliness to their writing. So that's why I really enjoyed this. The writing in it is really great. But it is also a bit of a dark story. This follows this town of Lucille, but there are no more monsters in Lucille. Only there are these monsters lurking, but the adults don't want to see it, or they don't acknowledge the monsters. They don't see the monsters, and the children are hurting because of this. But it has this overarching theme of being brave, and that to me means that there's a lot of hope in the story or in the message that we're being told. But I would highly recommend this one. The next one, again, it's not a light-hearted read. It deals with topics of suicide, which was very raw, but also kind of painful to read about. And that is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily Xrpan. So this book follows the story of Lee, and her mother dies because of suicide. Lee is left with a lot of guilt, a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. But then there's also this color. Color becomes a really big theme in the book. And there's a lot of magical realism. So Lee discovers this bird that leads her to Taiwan. Her mother is Taiwanese. So this magical bird, because like I said, magical realism, leads her to Taiwan and brings her closer to her mother's side of the family, her mother's parents. These are people that she doesn't really know, and she's never really felt like she belongs in this part of her family. So she's exploring that. I think a common theme with most of these books is that the writing is very lyrical and very poetic. This one, 100%. It is a bit too thick. That is my problem with this book. I think it's too thick. But it's still a really good book. It deals with topics of suicide, but I do think there's a very hopeful message in the story. I think a nice thing that I also really enjoyed in this book was like the overall theme of memories, and every time Lee thinks of her mother, that was just really stunning to me. So that's why I think this really has an overall positive, hopeful tone to it. Okay, so I only have 2 adult books to give you. One is like a rom-com, a little romance. Well, it's not really a rom-com, but it is a romance story, and that is The Ties That Tether by Jane Agaro. So this story follows our main character who promises her dad, as he's dying, that she will never marry a man that is not Nigerian, because they're immigrating to Canada. But then she falls in love with a white guy. He is from Spain, I think. This book is a bit heavier than it looks. I'm like, this isn't a dark book. This isn't like A Little Life or something. But it is quite sad because the relationship she has with her mother is so strained, and the guilt she feels because she's going against her father and she's losing her culture, or that's how she feels. It's really sad to read about, but the ending is beautiful. I enjoyed the ending. I actually really love this book, so I would recommend this one. The second one is a very dense, melancholy novel, but again, there is a message of hope, especially when it comes to the ending. And that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Eleanor Oliphant leads a simple life. She wears the same clothes to work every day, eats the same meal for lunch every day, buys the same 2 bottles of vodka to drink every weekend. Eleanor Oliphant is happy. Nothing is missing from her carefully timetabled existence, except sometimes everything. This one is quite sad because if you follow Eleanor, and her life is pretty, I'll say it, it's sad. She has a sad life, and it's very lonely and just not great. But going through the novel and how it ends. I really enjoyed it. I did think there was a hopeful element to it, so that is why I'm suggesting this one. Those are all the books. If you have any recommendations for books that you think are very hopeful, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching this, and I love you. Bye. Make good choices and help you make lots of money. Bye.